Who would be stupid enough to lower interest rates when inflation caused by the government overspending is still hot? The stock market is at a near all-time high, and the employment level, according to the government's numbers, not the real numbers, but according to the government's numbers, is at an all-time low. Unless, A, the picture is painted as an illusion, meaning the underlying facts point to a severe downturn. B.
Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is extremely important, and some of you may have noticed that I haven't been releasing any new content over the past couple days. The preparation of today's video is the reason why, as it directly impacts the movement and direction of this very channel and the very empowerment of its viewers. And obviously I have our community wizard, seasoned building developer, quantitative financing expert, Mitch Wexler, here today to help break down the entire state of the economy, government spending, the housing market, and the overall health of the consumer. And I can guarantee you, if you watch the entirety of this video, you will leave here more empowered, and you will leave here with valuable insights and a thorough under-the-hood breakdown of the current state of what's going on. And why do you guys need to do that? Well, so you can survive the challenges and improve your life. Mitch, how are you, buddy?
Good. It's been a long several days, but the amount of information that's coming in from all the viewers, along with the evidence, which is really crucial, is very important. And you're going to see as we go through all this how these things start connecting. And that's what I hope to achieve here, is to be able to connect the dots.
Well, let's start connecting the dots and let's start mainstream. Let's start with, well, what a lot of people are talking about, the stock market. Now, during obviously the course of this video series, you've called for the reversal of a double bottom. You've argued actually made the argument for a double all-time high. And, here's the thing, Mitch. I don't understand the stock market. I know it's very influential to consumers. I know that it can really swing emotion, but I just don't understand it. Can you tell me and can you explain to viewers how are you calling this? How do you have that? What experience do you have that you're able to do this, that you're capable of doing this?
Well, it's taken a long time to be able to learn all the idiosyncrasies on how the market responds, because one can be a technical analyst and look at the charts and not care about the fundamentals or anything else. But first, let's get something clear. There's an old saying that past performance is no guarantee of future performance, and I'm not always right. With that said, price shocks, usually caused by human interference, can temporarily knock the probabilities out of its expected range, which is what we saw a couple of weeks ago when the liquidity on a Sunday night dried up, and that caused a volatility spike, the kinds of which have never been seen. I consider myself a permanent student of the markets, and that is what quantitative finance and statistical probability allow me to do. So statistical probability and quantitative finance, to me, are the study of volatility and the effect on pricing of an underlying asset, which leads to the expected move. So not to get all geeky on everybody, but there are several components that go into judging the value of a property as well as a stock value. And they're alpha, beta, delta, gamma, theta, rho, verta, voma, vana, speed, charm, and I think I said voma as well, and color. So these
Mitch, did you say charm?
Yes, charm.
Continue.
These are the first, second, and third tier derivatives of the Black-Scholes-Merton formula. This formula is used to create the cumulative density function of a standard normal distribution, which tells us what the probability of an event occurring within a specific range, up or down, and the probability of that event occurring, all else being equal. This means that given the known volatility of price of an underlying stock or index, that price should be between a resulting upper price and a resulting lower price, which can be seen in the Gaussian channel are also seen in the pricing of puts and calls on an options chain in the form of delta. All those Greeks that I mentioned end up being reflective inside of delta. I watch the markets to keep an eye on the interest rates, stock indexes, gold, and oil. However, the exact same formula can be used to determine the pricing of real estate, and very few people know this, and very few people even know how to apply this. Once you understand that price can probabilistically be determined, then one can use Monte Carlo analysis in Excel to predict out in time to determine the future value within a range. We can take this up one more notch as a method of quantifying the probabilities of an event occurring and hedge or think about what-if scenarios. Hedging can take different forms, but the point here is the study of volatility in my world is crucial as it affects every person watching these videos, even though they may not realize it. If you have a mortgage or a house or a commercial property or a competitive business, then the volatility of price, even if the price is stable temporarily, affects you every single day. You just don't know it. Mortgages are pooled, cut into pieces, bought and sold, as well as houses and commercial properties are bought and sold, all of which creates volatility of price. Standard deviation is a measure of volatility. Did you know that the standard deviation is a requirement within inside of USPAP, that's Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, and the Texas Property Tax Code? Did you know that uniform and equal is a requirement under the Texas Constitution? Did you know that standard deviation can be used on a line-by-line basis to compare such things as income, rent per square foot, operating expenses, debt to income, etc.? Why is it that DCAD is not using standard deviation as required in law? I would argue that if DCAD were adhering to the law and standard deviation, Travis and I would never have met, and there would be no need for these lawsuits. As we have seen through the evidence, the CADs do not adhere to the law or standard deviation because it is their intent to commit fraud and simultaneously violate multiple state and federal laws, all in favor of continuing the cover-up of their prior frauds, and that is the definition of a Ponzi scheme. In addition to standard deviation, commercial income producing real estate has other determinants of value, including discounted present value, net present value, return on investment, return on cash, debt to income ratios. How is it that DCAD is not running any of this analysis as required in USPAP and the Texas Property Tax Code? No CAD that we have seen is capable or cares about adhering to the laws, which is required, and specifically, and this is a quotation, under the Texas Property Tax Code, all clear and convincing evidence. That is a requirement. Volatility of price is the determiner of value, as is a quantifiable method, and compared, frankly, to what Charles Stafford said to Mr. Don Spencer, the chief appraiser. Mr. Spencer, you and your team are the masters at guessing. You're not allowed to guess in law.
Yeah, and there's not, we lean on math for a reason in it. Just to break that back down, Mitch, and correct me, please, if I'm wrong, but it seems to me you're a mathematical expert when it comes to volatility and when it comes to price. Is that fair for me to say that?
Well, I kind of don't look fondly upon that word expert. I mean, it depends what context you're talking about. I'm not paid to do this, so I'm doing this because this is something that I know, and in reality, this is something I've been doing since I was a kid. I just couldn't define it at that time, but I understand what's happening here, and I understand what's happening to mom and pop. And more than that, even what I understand is really not even relevant. The question is, what can I prove? And everything I can prove is on that website. They can't get out of this box, and nor can they argue anything that I'm saying.
Well, one thing I want to prove, and I hope that's proven during this video, is the catastrophe that is consumer apathy. I want the viewers to understand what apathy is, which is a lack of interest, and how dangerous that is for our civilization and society. And that's a primary reason why the lack of enforcement over existing laws to stop the fraud that's going on. But that brings me to my next question, Mitch, and I want to kind of clear the air here. A lot of people have not understood what you're saying. You know, they're, oh, what do, property taxes, let's get away with property taxes. Where's the money? Anti-government, anti-government. But Mitch, will you please explain to the viewers, and may I ask you, sir, Are you anti-government?
No, not at all. I'm in favor of a functioning government that is there for the citizens, not for the growth of the government itself, which by definition is dysfunctional, and which is socialism as seen in Canada, which unfortunately is why I left my home country. I've seen this before. I consider myself an economic conservative, and based on my experience and the evidence we have, I'm doing what I can to help mom and pop. The mandate of safety, health, and welfare of the citizens is necessary to stop chaos in any society, and that should be the functioning maximum role of government. With that said, I am anti-CAD because based on the analysis and the evidence on DCAD, and now in receipt of evidence from other jurisdictions, my conclusion is that the CADs are conspiring not to adhere to USPAP, state property tax codes, state constitutions, and the US Constitution. And if they were adhering to the law, then 80% of the current employees at the CADs would not be necessary. And that's a major point right there. It takes manpower to create a cover-up of fraud, the size of which makes Bernie Madoff look like a piker.
Mitch, real quick, just for the viewers, just depending on when they've joined us, you guys, I want you to look at the CAD, which is the Central Appraisal District. That's the tax collector. So when we say CAD or DCAD or whatever, that's your jurisdiction's tax collector. And what Mitch is trying to explain to you is the fact that there's so much apathy and lack of care for consumers to fight these tax collectors, the fraud has gotten to a level where the entire system that we're in is unrepairable. So just wanted to catch everyone up. Mitch, please continue, sir.
So the employees at these CADs, we talk about DCAD, or any of the CADs, create subterfuge for what is clearly a Ponzi scheme of immense proportions at the command of the co-conspirators, such as the taxing entities. These CADs are owned by taxing entities like the school districts. You can call it Louisville Independent School District or Denton Independent School District. It doesn't matter. What you're about to learn through these videos, there's multiple school districts doing the exact same thing. This has turned into a Ponzi scheme of biblical proportions. And to that point, just recently, what was brought to our attention are something called the 313 agreements in the Itasca School District, which are promoted by the state comptroller, wherein the school board agreed to backstop the financing and construction of solar fields. Well, the return of investment and return on investment are murky at best, and there appears to be no notes reflecting the same on the school's budget, and also there appears to be no cost-benefit analysis. So if that doesn't get your attention, then the stated debt principal in 2004 and 2025 proposed budget of 8.25 million is down from 9.6 million. Where did over $1 million come from? There's no information, no footnotes as to how this could happen unless the district received windfall money from excessive taxes, which proves overvaluation and overtaxation at the hands of the CAD. And that is not yet reported in the budget. Well, now the question becomes why? If this is the case, then the district might be attempting to put themselves in a position not to receive less state matching funds because they intend to receive more money from the federal government in addition to the solar farm taxes and hide the fact from the federal government. This is pretty serious. Could it be that the school district is hiding the fact that they've received a great deal of money from the fraudulently overvalued and increased taxes collected in 2024 and have not accounted for that in the proposed budget of the 2024 and 2025? And the net result would be creating a fraud, not just on the citizens, but on the federal government.
Mitch, real quick, let me catch up some of the viewers. What Mitch is talking about right now is basically the CAD, the tax collector, one of their biggest takers of our tax money, if you will, is the school districts, actually by far. But they're also in charge of other municipalities. And essentially what has happened, guys, is, again, the lack of enforcement, the lack of transparency, and the apathy of the consumer. And what Mitch is going over right now are these solar contracts called 313 agreements. That's why I flashed this on the screen right here to show you guys it's a statewide problem. This is in New York. They're basically making agreements with these 313 contracts with solar companies that have failing business. So the school districts are using your money and my money to pay 3 times the amount that the market amount to these solar companies. And Mitch, I apologize for interrupting you, brother. Please continue.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I'd point out to the people who are co-conspirators in this, even though you may or may not know what you're doing, I'd like to point out Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 1512C, 1 and 2. Whoever corruptly alters, destroys, conceals, or obstructs, influence, impedes, with intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for use in an official proceeding, which is what the school district board has done, apparently, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. The point I am making here is that being on the board and signing an oath means something extremely important, and simply stating we didn't know will be of no value to you in front of a judge.
Mitch, really important to cover what you just said. One thing for the viewers, how do you change that? How do you put more things on record that you as a consumer are notifying your tax collectors and appraisal districts? You have to fight. You have to notify them just like Mitch has done. He's notified them, hey, you guys are breaking the law. There's no math here. The more and more you guys do that in your own jurisdictions in regard to your own property, the more promptly this will change. Mitch, I apologize, sir. Continue.
No, it's good. So the Itasca School District should be quickly investigated and probably be placed into involuntary bankruptcy and or conservatorship to unwind the mess. The Itasca School District case is one more piece of an ever-growing list of evidence that people are sending in because they know that their properties are overvalued and property taxes are being stolen. The evidence on the Itasca school case can be found on a newly created website that was just launched last night, and it's called www.commonsenselaw.org. In addition to the Itasca School District, we also have the case of the Tarrant Appraisal District meeting last week, as reported by Emily Wolf, which we discussed on a prior video, where many of the Tarrant School County districts showed up at that meeting demanding that the appraisal district keep raising the property taxes year after year, even though the Tarrant Appraisal District had met the prior week in an attempt to freeze the values. Or they, the schools, will be broke, which proves that A, the schools are financially bankrupt today, B, morally bankrupt because it was made clear in the Tarrant Appraisal District meeting that the children are secondary in thought, and the main emphasis is the school district's pocketbooks. It's interesting to point out how 2 different school districts in 2 different regions of the state of Texas, not including the Denton Central Appraisal District, have the exact same requirement to keep raising property taxes to cover off the annual shortfall.
But Mitch, I want the viewers to really understand. This is just what Mitch is working on with his soul, right? This is where his efforts are, his actions are. Don't think that it's just there. We've had people reached out from, I think, 47 states now, Mitch, and for the same exact problem. So it's this type of fraud and overvaluation is happening across the nation. And we're going to get back to the stock market, but this all is connected. Continue, Mitch.
Exactly. And what we're trying to do here is explain to everybody how all these dots are connected, and it all starts with mom and pop. So if the property taxes, just for the sake of conversation, never mind what I'm doing or anybody else is doing, let's just say the market causes a 15% drop in the value of those property taxes. Do you understand? And where exactly is that money going to come from to pay off that shortfall? And the answer is it isn't, because we've already proven that 37% of the households can't afford the roof over their head and they're in harm's way of bankruptcy. So to this point, which is also pretty interesting, on Saturday, I received a call from a very nice person who happens to be a trustee on a school board in Frisco. Frisco is actually, part of Frisco is in Denton Central Appraisal District's jurisdiction. I explained an event to this person that we have documented on the Mockingbird Properties /DCAD website. And the response from that person was, well, that just can't be. This person's concern was that the board was not turning over the financial documents that this person had sought. In our discussion, this person had locked onto the fact that one or a few of the school district board members had met with the chief appraiser to deliver the budget numbers from which the chief appraiser totals them up and then backs into the property values by literally having predetermined budgets handed to him from the school districts. This person clearly didn't understand what is happening, and I suggested that a deep dive to connect the dots would be appropriate for any person whose head is buried in the sand, because this problem affects 144 million homeowners in the United States alone. I then explained that if the taxing entities were not colluding with the CADs, then how could all the evidence on the Mockingbird site exist? And the evidence includes DCADs and its own employees' testimony and tax roll certifications. We didn't make any of this up. These are their documents. They don't have anywhere to go. What are they going to do? Deny the evidence? It's their damn documents. And that was the point.
But Mitch, it's more, I've personally heard the audio. They're not even denying this. I heard the chief appraiser state on record through recorded testimony that they removed 60,000 comparable properties, that they put it in Excel, they manipulated that data, and then they put it back into the system. And he congratulated his staff for doing that. And he stated that doing that was a business decision, which that it's just there's multiple combinations. The protection for the taxpayer is not there. Okay. But there's also, again, the apathy, the lack of care. So again, I really hope the viewers that are making it this far in this journey, when the time comes, and it's coming shortly, the tax season's about to start next year, I hope you guys step up. I hope you step up, because we all need you to, because of the apathy, guys. Mitch, please continue, sir. And we're gonna get back to the stock market. Like I said, guys, we're gonna talk about the 1920s. This is really important stuff.
So, and coming back to your point, Travis, on those two facts alone, where Don Spencer stood up and said we manipulated 60,000 properties in Excel and put them back, plus Charles Stafford's own statement, which is, Mr. Spencer, you and your team are the masters at guessing. On those 2 points alone, DCAD belongs in a criminal investigation immediately, because they can't get away from it. It's their own testimony. And by the way, that testimony in both instances is under threat of perjury. So just to show you how twisted the position of the school districts at these appraisal board meetings is, by not arguing to lower or eliminate property taxes as a result of the corruption, they are literally arguing against their friends, family, and themselves. Eliminating property taxes in favor of a sales tax is the only quantifiable solution, not more dysfunctional, mob acting like government, i.e. RICO, to manufacture and then cover up more crimes against the citizens.
Speaking of citizens, let's go back and let's look at the 1920s. There are a lot of people that are confused, Mitch, for understandable reasons. Data manipulation. Why is the government and the census manipulating data? Control over the narrative to keep the fraud going, because at this point, I hope you guys as the viewers understand we would be in recession. We would be in a depression if it was not for not just government and Fed intervention. Y'all, it is the fraud that is holding everything together. There's literally too much money in the system, and the only way to release some of that money and to keep this going is the fraud. And so if you can, Mitch, from even a consumer standpoint, GDP, are we repeating the 1920s? Does this situation have the potential to be worse because the intervention has been greater?
On one hand, the intervention has been greater. On the other hand, one could make the argument that the regulations have been completely ignored, causing this problem. So over the years, I've been tracking this, and I got my own little hit list, but there are similarities to the 1920s. So they would be wage and wealth disparity. We have that. Energy consumption is low. The debt level is extraordinarily high at 126% of the gross domestic product, not including unfunded liabilities. And the unsafe level is considered 90% above gross domestic product. In the 1930s, the US and much of the world were in a Great Depression with interest rates near zero. and defaulting debt and failing banks were the norm. Okay, and we're about to learn something about what the Fed is up to. After the war, what got people working was the abundant supply of fossil fuels that was used to create debt-based demand to pull the economy forward. Infrastructure jobs were created as part of the necessity to improve the gross domestic product. The stock market collapsed on October 29th, 1929. The speculative bubble was fueled by low short-term interest rates. Okay? Hold that thought for a minute. Now, what's identical? The economy becomes very fragile when growth in the energy sector is low compared to the growth of the world's population. The debt can't be managed without growth. Weak banks will default and close. Price drops in homes, farms, and other assets has a very high probability. Debt defaults are very likely to occur as a result of asset prices dropping. Governments defaulting on their loans and pension plans going bankrupt, also a high probability. So based on these two issues, what was and what is, we certainly have a situation that looks very, very close to me. You be the judge. I'd like to add that there is somewhat of a fix, meaning there will be pain, but it doesn't have to turn out to a full depression with 25% plus unemployment. It takes serious people to understand the depth of the problem and then tell the truth about the plan to correct course to minimize the damage. This is exactly why voting matters and exactly why people cannot bury their head in the sand. You cannot be apathetic. This is all hands on deck. We have the energy resources within our shores. We have the knowledge within our shores. We have the people, mom and pop, which is the economic engine within our shores. So ensuring that they have their own assets under their feet and they own those assets by eliminating property taxes will go a long way towards minimizing the economic damage. President Trump is more aligned with the above than any other party. However, it is crucial that people not pay rent on their land because they need the ability to build their wealth, and that is the largest asset for most people.
Mitch, let me ask you this, okay? Going back to the stock market, and I want to ask you about demand being pulled forward, the demand being pulled forward each time the Fed intervenes, and that demand is not just consumers, that demand is also Wall Street. We saw that 2013 on. So demand is being pulled forward unnaturally by the Federal Reserve. And it's being maintained by straight up fraud. I should care as a consumer because this is affecting my life. My life has evolved, if you will, into a debt enslavement. It has affected my children's education, my own happiness, my own ability to thrive. Essentially, I'm paying for other people's fraud. The actual tax, the premise of the tax is not even going to help the people, the very people that we were told it was going to help. We see that with the MBS. And so have we hit that double top yet? Tell us a little bit more about the house, not about the house market yet, but tell us a little bit more about the stock market and how are you playing the stock market yourself, Mitch?
Well, per se, I don't play the stock market. What I would be doing is when we see a true double top where the market starts backing up, and you'll see things like the housing market itself. Like if you look at the stocks of D.R. Horton or Lennar, they're pretty close to all-time highs, if not at all-time highs. So this isn't the time to go short. The time to go short is when you see a double top and the market is already headed short. So what you're beginning to see, and I hope we're trying to get through to everybody, is that the dots are all connected. Well, when you have these housing companies that own their own appraisers, as you saw in Jeremy Bago's video that Travis did, you see that there's problems with these appraisals. When you look at the CADs, there's problems with the appraisals, and for different reasons. But the problem is there are problems. And you could say, well, there's not enough regulation. Yeah, this statement would be true, but here's the underlying point. Nobody seems to give a damn about the current regulation, so adding more isn't going to change what's happening here. And the Fed, in reality, although it sounded good on paper when it was created, was really created to backstop the Rothschilds banks. It had nothing to do with anything else. And the Fed to this day doesn't really care about Main Street, mom and pop. They're still there for the exact same reason, which was to stop a bank run But the problem is you have now 5,800 some odd banks in the United States. When the stock market collapsed last time, give or take, there was about 200. Okay. The government isn't big enough to backstop these banks. The Federal Reserve isn't big enough to backstop these banks. And as I've said, they haven't been on the right side of a decision since the day they were created. So yeah, they're there to backstop the banks, but that doesn't help mom and pop. Now you can make the argument if the banks go broke, then that's hurting mom and pop. Absolutely. But the reality is the United States should have today probably less than 500 banks. And when you get in under the hood and you look at the shadow banks and you look at the hyper creation of credit, this is all bad. And this stuff cannot be unwound. It's a spaghetti bowl. It would take Lord knows how many forensic accountants to pull this stuff apart. And therein lies the problem. It's all being hidden. And if you're built on a fraud, mom and pop are going to get hit. Not just in the value of their houses, they're going to get hit in the pensions. So this is bad, and it needs to be unwound slowly and properly with thought in order to stop maximum damage. This isn't about not being damaged. This is about stopping maximum damage.
Let's talk about something you had mentioned, and I want to segue into the cause and effect of that. You said something, and I like this. You're the first person I heard really pinpoint this hyper creation of credit, right? These shadow banks, these banks don't really have their own money. They're using someone else's money. They're cutting the asset, slicing the asset up. It's a really, really bad thing. But what I want people to understand is because of many reasons, corruption is a huge one. As soon as things are corrupted, we pay as society. We need the people at the top, and we need the elites, the elected officials, not to be corrupt. That's it. That's all. I don't care anymore, Mitch, Republican, Democrat. I just want someone that is going to decide to care about the people before the elites' profit margins. I didn't realize that was so much, though, Mitch. That has been, it's too much to ask for. It's so bad now. My children are paying for it. And this is what it looks like. Mitch is mathematically, again, he's a wizard and mathematically put that formula into the overvaluation of houses. Look at this, guys. And I just want to break this down real quick. Mitch has done an example of an appraisal district. This is Denton, okay? The population is about 1 million people. And I'm just going to go straight to the average median home value in that county. So the average median home value in that county is $514,000, okay? Which, based on all its calculations, median household income, mortgage payment, property taxes, homeowners insurance, bringing it to a total monthly housing payment, that puts the average home owner at a 48.62% debt to income ratio. And that's a front end debt to income ratio. That means this is not including credit, car payments. It's not including taxes being taken out. This is a gross income calculation. Now, when you go down and you talk about the qualified mortgage law and guidelines stating the front end ratio, I'm not talking back, I'm talking front end ratio, where it's a measurement of gross income into your mortgage payment. No debt included. That is the front end. The back end is with debt included, like credit cards and cars. The maximum, according to the guidelines, according to the reason why they sold us as Americans to bail out the banks during the great financial crisis and in 2012 during Operation Twist, they said we're safe as consumers and this problem will never happen again, yet it has happened again. It's just more clever. It's more fraudulent. It's more embedded systemically in our homes. Shocking. So when you look at the 28% versus the average of 48.62%, you start to realize that the true value should be something around $296,000. Not $514,000, which is an overvaluation based on just, things like consumer health, affordability, the livelihoods of our family, the ability to raise our children. 74% overvalued. Can you go into that, ma'am?
So I just want to point out something that you said, which is there's 144 million houses in the United States. fraud is touching virtually every single one of them. And this is not left-right issue. Fraud cannot denote if you're on the right or the left. Everybody's being affected by this. Everybody's money is being stolen. The system has become beyond repair. We have the evidence that the database is irretrievably corrupt. And what you're seeing here, just in this one page alone, these are several counties, which indirectly shows that they're all talking to each other and copying from each other. They're copying the fraud. But if you go across the bottom, so in Johnson County, the CAD exceeding the affordability level is 64%. Then go across 74%, 63%, 38%, 104% in Travis, 67% in Tarrant. This literally shows that this is a cancer that has truly metastasized across the United States. And I handed you a list before of all the areas that are now coming into us saying, we've got this problem, we've got this problem. It is truly across the United States. It just happens to be ground zero is Texas because we've got the evidence and nobody's ever been able to get their hands on. We now have it.
You know what's amazing about that, man? It's just like, and it's a non-disclosure state. You would think it would be harder for us to find this information being it's a non-disclosure state. Like, whereas like disclosure states, California, everything is public. That's how bad the fraud is. That's how much they rely on that property tax fraud to maintain. If I can, Mitch, can we go into Powell? Will you go in now to Powell basically vowing recently to cut interest rates? And, meanwhile, home prices, stocks, food, all-time highs. So a lot of people don't get that, right? We have all-time highs for everything pretty much. And now Powell is suggesting and appearing to guarantee the market that he's going to cut interest rates. What impact is that having? Will that have on the economy? And what does that tell us about what's going on under the hood?
Okay, so there's a couple of points in here, and I guess I'll just start at the beginning of this. But if the Fed went on vacation for 5 years, literally just locked the doors and walked out, then there's something that I mentioned before, which is called RO, which is the interest rate. Well, if RO would be stable for 5 years, that fact in and of itself would prove that the Fed isn't necessary. Let's think about that for a second. You need stability in a market for the market to be able to maneuver and create value. Well, the Fed is not monkeying around and financially engineering society for the benefit of the banks, then RO would be stable. Now, we learned that the Fed is going to come out and they're talking about lowering prices. So let's talk about that for a second. Who would be stupid enough to lower interest rates when inflation caused by the government overspending is still hot? The stock market is at a near all-time high, and the employment level, according to the government's numbers, not the real numbers, but according to the government's numbers, is at an all-time low, unless A, the picture is painted as an illusion, meaning the underlying facts point to a severe downturn. B, political interference. C, somebody figured out that the interest on the debt can't be paid by the government or its citizens, which would require near zero interest rate policy and a freeze and immediate reduction of spending by the government. Well, that's likely not to happen, but something is clearly up. The Fed's position clearly is let's try one more round of fraud, kick the can down the road so that Powell can state it didn't collapse under his watch. And that's really no different than what Bernanke did. Deja vu. Ergo, that proves my point. The Federal Reserve should have the doors chained. They are of no value. They add no value into the system other than for the benefit of allegedly backstopping the banks, but there's too many banks for them to backstop. So if near zero interest rate is a requirement, then for what purpose does the Federal Reserve exist on interest rate policy? Without the exception, since the day it was created in 1935, being a scam designed to backstop the banks because the banks were creating highly leveraged credit. So my question is, how's that working out for you?
Well, I could tell you how it worked out for me when I was part of that problem, Mitch. I lost everything and it took me 9 years to start to rebound. So that's what happened to me. But, speaking of the shadow banks, speaking all of this crazy lack of transparency, lack of enforcement, and what appears to be free will of these lenders to just generate credit and money, and you're talking about they put the risk on us as consumers, right? So aren't these programs a fancy word for loan shark, like the hard money, the buy now, pay later, the DCSR loans, the Airbnb loans, the bank statement loans exceeding 28% debt to income ratio as required by the guidelines? Isn't all that just a fancy word for loan sharking?
Yes, and there's lots of problems inside of that. But when you make people desperate, they do desperate things. And it's a combination of lack of education, because in reality, if you can't make the payment today, what makes you think you can make that payment in 6 months or 12 months from now? So the hard money lenders are nothing more than a fancy title. So if you're a short-term hard money lender and you're loaning money at 18, 24, 30%, you are loan sharking. Loan sharking falls under the definition of RICO. And I have no sympathy for those people who are doing that. And frankly, most of them belong in jail, because they prey upon people who don't have the education to understand that if I can't make it today, what are the probabilities of me being able to make that payment in 6 months or a year from now? So do not fall for any of this nonsense. Well, it's just a temporary loan, we'll help you out. Because the reality is you're handing the keys to your house to a loan shark. You may not realize it, but that's the reality. You're better off going to the bank and saying, I've got a problem, I need to rewrite the mortgage, I need to extend the mortgage. Deal with somebody who's legitimate, not somebody who's got a sole interest in taking your property. And you would be put in this position in reality because the taxes have gone up, they claim the values have gone up, you can't afford it based on the fraud. So it all comes back at the tail end of the day, again, connecting the dots to the CADs that are creating the fraud on behalf of the taxing entities.
So, and speaking of people trying to take your property, Mitch, can you explain to the viewers why the market, the media, Goldman Sachs has suggested that the housing market, that real estate has hit its bottom? Why would they be saying that? Because obviously we'll have to acknowledge, it confuses people. It confuses people, especially, Mitch, in tight markets. And those tight markets where they don't see what we see here in Texas, and then with that coupled with mainstream media suggesting that we're wrong, they're right. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so that question came about as a direct result of a viewer seeing something in Zero Hedge where Goldman Sachs said the real estate market has bottomed. And I'm going to answer that question with a series of questions. Why has the birth rate in the United States declined since 2009? Could it be as a direct result of government policies to the financial crisis, 2008, 2009? The policies favored capital and those who already owned assets at the expense of everyone who did not have assets or were too young to buy a house. Could it be that the cost of hospitalization has gone up 99% since 2008? Could it be that the people recognize that there's problems in the pensions and that those pensions may be insolvent? In the last 4 years across Texas and many other states, as a result of the CADs committing fraud by ignoring USPAP and increasing the values of homes by 100%, that's 4 years up 100% plus. Did your income go up 100% plus in the last 4 years? Of course not. Wasn't it Goldman Sachs who needed a bailout in 2008 from the government and Warren Buffett? Could it be that Goldman Sachs is in denial? Or more to the point, could they just be preaching their book long enough to sucker people into the market when they load up on puts and credit default swaps and are in fact preparing for the reversal of the market? Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
So, Mitch, what I hear is, and what the data suggests clearly, beyond a shadow of doubt to me, because math is math, 2 + 2 = 4, we can't afford to have a family, many of us, Many of us, and I have 4 kids, so I feel this. Many of us cannot afford to have a family as a result of the overwhelming fraud. Okay? So, can you explain, how do you think that population decline will impact residential real estate?
No, it's easy. All you got to do is look at Japan. All right. Japan is in a world of hurt because they have population decline. And you have a circular argument. I've been saying before, you have cumulative compounding. Well, cumulative compounding means, under the rule of 72, that the debt, be it both national debt and unfunded liabilities, which has both of them have interest rates associated with them, and those interest payments have to be paid. Well, those things are doubling, give or take, anywhere between 5 and 7 years. Well, if your population is going down, then please explain how you're going to pay this off. And the answer is you're not. And the sooner the world wakes up and recognizes that problem, the faster we can deal with this nonsense.
Mitch, are the CADs, remember guys, the tax collector, are the CADs involved in white collar crime?
Well, so I went to Wikipedia and I looked up the definition of white collar crime, which refers to financially motivated, nonviolent, and non-direct violent crime committed by individuals, businesses, and government professionals. And it goes on and on. But the bottom line is, yeah, by definition, that is what it is. But more important to the point, under federal law, I want to read something. A reviewing court shall hold unlawful and set aside agency action, findings and conclusions found to be arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with law. That's USC 706-2A. You know who actually put that to a Supreme Court brief in December of 2023? Ken Paxton, Attorney General, State of Texas. That's federal law. He's quoting the federal law back to the Supreme Court. Well, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. That's my first comment. Second comment is, if the shoe were on the other foot, you have to look at it through those eyes, your honors. And the reality is, clearly, DCADs and all the CADs actions are arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion, and not in accordance with the law because they violated USPAP, they violated the Texas Property Tax Code, they violated the Texas Constitution, and therefore, they also violated the Constitution of the United States of America under the 5th, 14th, 16th, and yeah, even the First Amendment when they're trying to stop people from talking at these ARB hearings. This whole thing is about connecting the dots. We now have the dots connected.
You know, Mitch, there's, having said all of that, the fraud that is very clear for you and I to see, they're still doing it.
Absolutely.
They're still doing it. And arguably it's getting much worse. And so a lot of people feel and ask themselves, and I've even done this myself. I'm not saying recently, but I've done this myself. I get insecure. I feel sometimes like I can't win. All of society, the system, the economy, the housing market is all out to get me, nowhere to run, blah, 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 blah. People will ask themselves, Mitch, and say they're just one person. What can they do to change things? How can you help them put money back in their pocket?
Okay. So I want to point out that Leslie, my accountant, our mole, you, Travis, JD at Keller Williams, and Mr. Lyons in Florida, and Mr. Mashburn, myself, and those who are writing and sending us emails and evidence from across the United States are individually just one person. It's one person getting off their butt and putting pen to paper and coming up with a solution that suits their circumstances. When you add all the actions of just those one persons, the result is what you see in these videos, and that is designed to inform. And once informed, then designed to arm you with a method to put the money back into your pocket and into the pocket of your family and the real estate taxpayers, and allow them to own their financial destiny by owning the land beneath their asset and by eliminating the property taxes. Again, connecting the dots. So in a mathematical formula, which I just put together, it says education equals information equals ability to protest and file suit where necessary. And that's what we're doing. Education, information, ability to protest. Following through on what you're learning and putting it into action means don't be apathetic and think that someone else will run the ball for you. I can't. I mean, the best I can do is show you our evidence, show you how it's set up, show you how it's structured, but you're going to have to pick up the ball with the information we're giving you and run it for your own property. There's 144 million homes, and every single property owner should watch this series of videos and see the evidence for themselves on the mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD website to understand the problem, and after which time those property owners will know more than the appraisal districts themselves. In addition, what you can do is forward these videos to as many people as you can and ask those people to do the same. Forward it out, get people moving, get them to understand what is happening beneath their feet, and frankly, annoy the hell out of them when you say, listen, you don't own the land under your feet. You're paying a tax on something you don't own. And if you don't pay the tax, they're going to take it from you, which proves the point. You don't own it. And that's why this is so important.
Mitch, and this is especially clear in Texas where we have outrageous property taxes. But I mean, it's clear to me, depending on the type of ownership, right, that especially where we live, that being a homeowner, you're just a glorified renter. And not only are you a glorified renter because you don't own the land, they will take it from you. There are people getting second jobs just to afford the property tax increase as a result of these districts backing into the value. And this is a nationwide corruption and fraud problem. All right. Having said all that, you're a renter of a property, even if you have ownership. I'm a realtor. Okay. I'm around realtors I've been around a lot of realtors, Mitch. I would even say I have a bias. Maybe it's tough love. I want to teach realtors how to be better pillars of their community. That's really important, I feel like. I'm just going to straight up ask you, man, are realtors committing fraud? Are realtors involved in fraud?
Straight up, highly likely, but it's by inducement, not necessarily by intent. So I did a video for KW, and they've got 84,000 realtors across Canada and the United States. And something that came out of there as I was in the car thinking about it on the way back is that realtors across the nation are being sucked into the middle of a scam created by the CADs. And we know this because Jeremy Bagot, in the video that you did with him, pointed out in his video that Fannie, Freddie, HUD are commanding that the fraud be done in order to hit the target of the appraised value, or the appraisal will be fired or never get another job. When the realtors look at the CAD valuation or receive an appraisal and accept it at face value for the purpose of receiving a commission, they put the commission first and put the buyer in a potential losing position, especially if they've engaged that buyer in a bidding war. True value is established with a willing buyer and willing seller, neither under duress and based on a cash settled amount. If the appraiser is being forced to commit fraud based on the CAD values or pumped up values at the demand of the appraiser's boss or the mortgage lending entity, then the realtor ends up inadvertently repeating the same fraud the appraisers were induced into, which further backs up onto the clients. Either way, it's not good. The problem is made even worse if the buyer enters into a bidding war, which they can't afford, as seen in the home affordability comparison PDF that we were just looking at. When you look at those values across the bottom of the screen, there's your fraud. You're overpaying for these properties, 64, 74, 63% based on affordability. There's your fraud. The beauty is we didn't make the numbers. We just created the format.
Honestly, Mitch, I would ask you, why is the CAD, and remember to the viewers, the tax collector, CAD tax collector, why is the tax collector doing this? But we already know that, Mitch. I mean, we've already knocked that out. I feel like we've knocked it out of the park. Like, okay, why, right? And then why manipulate data? Control. They need control, and the system is relying, again, I think I've said this already, but is relying on the consumer to maintain apathy. And why, man? Why? You know, it's messed up. But I want you to go into this. for the people that are confused, maybe there are people that live in a smaller appraisal district, okay? Maybe there are people that are hearing this, but they're saying to themselves, maybe in a tight market, Mitch, and they're saying to themselves, this is not going to impact me. Texas is a different beast. Denton County has a much bigger issue. What do you tell those people that tell themselves it doesn't impact them?
It does impact them. If you're a billionaire, it will impact you. If you're a person who owns a $200,000 house, it does impact you. So the idea that this isn't going to touch anybody is complete nonsense. And the reason why is if you're a billionaire and 40 or 50% of your staff shows up one day and says, I can't afford to live in my house, give me more money. Well, congratulations, Mr. Billionaire. You now will start feeling the heat, right? You've got employees, you're going to have this problem. If you're a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $1 million homeowner, clearly right now today, you've got this problem and this isn't going away. So the idea of why are the CADs doing this? Well, in truth, they need to, just like you saw with the Turn Appraisal District when the school showed up. School showed up because it said, if you don't continue to raise, not freeze, raise the property values, we will go bankrupt. Point being, you're already bankrupt. Therefore, the school districts are the taxing entities giving commands in the form of predetermined budgets to the appraisal districts. The appraisal districts don't give it about accuracy or truth. They only care about timelines and meeting the predetermined budgets as commanded by the taxing entities. Full circle, which leads to the creation of the fraud. So money is stolen over and above what would be the legitimate value if they adhere to the law, which they don't. And therefore, you've got graft and corruption at the CAD level and the taxing entity level. And people have got to wake up because this does irrefutably affect every real estate taxpayer throughout the United States. Doesn't matter who you are.
You know, Mitch, I don't know about the viewers that are listening to this, but even though we prepared for days, it still hits me thinking about and reflecting on what you're saying. I mean, and it's reinforcing what I've been saying for the last 2 years, which is save your money, rebudget, 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 remember your roots, love, relationship, family. But to dig in a little bit more, will you please tell the viewers, and I have a list as well, what are some of the areas that we've had people reach out to us to provide us evidence? And even not only just evidence, Mitch, we've had viewers confirm with intimate personal detail and tragedy and pain exactly what we're saying, and then explain, Mitch, how most of the time it's too late.
So one of the questions we received was, we live in a smaller community, smaller appraisal district. Are we affected as much as you are in Denton and Fort Worth? Well, the answer is yes. Like I just said a few minutes ago, this affects everybody. Burying your head in the sand isn't going to get anything accomplished. So a list of those cities and states with people's evidence that has come in: Cedartown, Georgia; Ohio; Chicago; Tennessee; Bellingham, Washington; Claiborne, Texas; South Carolina; Ontario, Canada; Brazoria County; New Braunfels in Comal County. I didn't even know there was such a thing. So I want to backtrack on 1 second. One of the people that reached out to me out of Ohio is an 84-year-old vet. He bought his house for $24,000. This year, he has to pay $3,100 in property taxes. He doesn't have the money. He's on fixed income. What are you idiots trying to do? Get him to move out of his house and put him in a seniors housing project somewhere that's going to cost the state $80,000 a year to maintain him when he's got his own house and he's perfectly capable of being there? Here's an idea. Why don't you leave him the hell alone? So you see, the problem is not only national, but international in scope. Look at the affordability comparison that we just went through to give you an idea of the scope of the problem. Magnify those numbers across the entire United States. Although county income numbers and property counts will change, the charts, spreadsheets, and graphs can be used as a base form from which any one of you out there that are seeing this can model your own district's information. The heavy lifting in terms of the design and verification methods, we've already done that for you. All you have to do is grab the local information and create the same format for your area. And now that puts you in command, and you will know more than your own appraisal districts. And based on what I see, it's not that difficult.
Mitch, I want to end here, okay? And I have a question, and I want to answer the question myself as well. But can you tell me what person, whether it's mom and pop, individual, that has reached out, most of the time it's a desperately for help, which makes it even more heartbreaking and overwhelming for me. Can you tell me what stranger, what person that has reached out has made the biggest impact on you and why? And I'll answer this first. For me, it was Carrie, the single mother who had purchased a new home in 2021, I believe, or 2020 at a super low interest rate. And she did all of these things to make sure that she could afford the house. She had an extra down payment she got from an inheritance, another tragedy. She wanted a quality of life with her daughter. But as a result of how Texas works, the tax collectors work, the fraud works on every level, she had to get a second job just to afford specifically the property tax increase. That probably hit me the hardest because that's my neighbor. She's right down the street. And Mitch, she did everything that she thought she could. Low interest rate. She's got over $100,000 in wedge. She's not even upside down. She has historically low interest rate. And she is so confused and upset and in pain as a result of this. It really hit me, man. It really reminds me of how we need to maintain our pure opinions and insights and not allow either one of you or me to be sucked into profiting off of our audience, to profiting off of people. The world needs more people to step up, and they need people who can afford to speak out. And man, when I met Carrie, that hit my soul. What about you?
The vet in Ohio, by far, it's just unconscionable. The idea that that's in the United States of America, no, under no circumstance should that happen. That's not acceptable. And the reality is that you have a choice. You can be apathetic and do nothing and think somebody else is going to pick up the ball for you. But that isn't going to get you anywhere because you can't fight, and they're depending on that. Yet when you have knowledge, you can fight. When it's clear of what your comparisons are and you know how to deal with those comparisons, and you walk in there and say, these are my comps, you do not have the right to choose the comps. The taxpayer does, not the CAD. And people don't even understand that. So the CAD can say, well, we have these comps and this is our argument. But when you put forth the real comparisons, according to the USPAT, that is the ultimate argument, because that is all clear and convincing evidence, not we pulled a comp from 35 miles away. So I want to make a point here that years ago, I had a couple of tenants that were in the healthcare business. So they own gyms. And do you know that 2 days after New Year's was their busiest day? People would walk in and start signing up all these quarterly, annually contracts. Well, that particular business knew damn well that those people would stop showing up within 15 days. So therefore, they collect the money, they depend on the apathy of the public, and then they never have to pay it back. Well, that's exactly what the CADs are doing. They're depending on the fact that the majority of the public doesn't have a clue what's going on here, and that's how they're getting away with what they're getting away with. If you simply walked in and said, okay, we're going to protest everything in sight from this point forward, and let's say that 80% of the population stands up and says, we're going to protest this as long as it takes. Well, congratulations, because that means you just broke the CAD. They don't have the money or the people, the manpower to do that. So the power to fix this is truly there, and there's different methods to do it. One of which is obviously the constitutional suit. The other one of which is one we talked about a couple of videos ago, how to break the CADs. Do it. Stand up and be accountable for the property below your feet. And if you don't, the truth of the matter is you're dooming all of us to being economic slaves. This is all hands on deck. We have something, this is the first time in history where all this information has been put together in one place for everybody to look at. And to this day, nobody has been able to find anything wrong with anything we've put out there. Nothing. And that tells you something.
Yeah, it does tell me something. And I want to tell the public something. And I want to tell the public and even the viewers, they can actually depend on us to lead by example. And one of the things I want to tell them, Mitch, is what I've been talking to you about. Mitch has motivated me. I mean, I've switched the direction with the way I'm deciding to empower the viewers. I was going to make a real estate school, warning about the red flags of purchasing. And what I've decided to do, you guys, is essentially we have 4 months to prepare you to fight the central appraisal districts. And so what I'm going to do personally, as someone that appreciates you, the viewer, and that really wants you to be empowered, I want to grow with you. Imagine that. Imagine a world where the elites and the people that we vote for want to grow with us, not off of us. I'm making you guys courses. And we're going to start from the very beginning. And we're going to learn what property tax is. We're going to learn how to fight the CADs. We're going to learn how not to get nervous. And if you are nervous, we're going to do the best we can, Mitch and I, to keep you in the box so that if they muscle you and bully you fraudulently and bully our children and our spouses and our family, we're going to have 2 pages. 1, your comps. 2, what to say legally to shut them down. And what I want you to do is record everything. Mitch, any last words, brother?
That's pretty well it. There's a lot to be done, but we have the path. And I just want to reiterate that I'm not in this for any money. I'm not getting paid for this. Nobody on my team is getting paid for this. This is strictly what we're doing to help mom and pop. And the truth of the matter is we are mom and pop. We're no different than everybody else out there. And that has got to resonate with you to help you get off your butt. For those that are just simply apathetic or say, well, I can't do it, I don't understand it. With a little bit of luck, Travis and I are going to work, and this is a big chore for us to figure this out, but we're going to work with the idea of trying to get you empowered, a couple pieces of paper that should get the job done, and we're working on it.
That's right. You good, because the thing is, guys, you got to ask yourself, how would you have the highest probability to help everyone despite their experience level? But the thing is, Mitch, is what I have found is almost every single person has a lack of experience level. So we're really just starting at step 1. So it actually does, it's fairly easy, because I'm going to start again. I'm going to start at the very beginning. People can watch these courses at their own will. I will be starting that this week. I'm very excited. It is my thank you to you, the viewers, who have allowed me the ability to walk away from greed and corruption. You guys have allowed me to do that. And I thank you for that. And Mitch, I'm going to get out of here, brother. Really, always, sir, absolute pleasure. I appreciate you spending the time with us. And hopefully I'll get this out tonight. If I do, happy Tuesday evening to you guys. We should be back in full swing after this video. Again, this was just very important. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. Hopefully, you guys are going to understand. Follow the links, guys. Follow the math. It's in the description. Follow the petitions. Take what we're saying seriously. Leave apathy at the door. And other than that, guys, I'm going to get you guys out of here. If you're out there investing in real estate, you guys already know we wish you luck, and we really hope you win.